For more now, we're joined by former ICE Chief of Staff Jason Hauser. Mr. Hauser, we thank you so much for joining us. Given the increasing tensions surrounding ICE operations in Minneapolis and across the country, really, I think many would be curious to know a little bit about the onboarding process, what it takes to become an ICE agent. Can you just walk us through what the requirements are in order to become an officer and what training looks like for them?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, typical ICE training over decades has been extremely rigorous, whether that's as a deportation officer or as a Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent. It has always been between 12 to 16 weeks of intense training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Facility. But it's a mirror of, it's a multiple different types of skill sets. It's everything from understanding the law and immigration authorities under Title VIII. It's also about understanding the rules of probable cause and enforcement, and also carrying out the duties of just sort of the management, administrative, and processing of individuals, bringing them into custody, doing it in a humane, just manner. But over the last few months, the administration has taken a course to collapsing a lot of that training down to, as reporting has shown, somewhere between 40 and 50 days. And some of it, as they've concluded, is on-the-job training that they're actually doing in the field offices. That can be really concerning. And go ahead.
Do you think that the current training curriculum is enough, or what more would you like to see?
Well, let's just keep it to what we know, essentially what we've seen, coming to fruition in Minneapolis. I mean, the situation that we saw with Mr. Pretti is those environments were extremely intense. The environments are very pressurized. Those operations are abnormal, whether that be for CBP doing domestic civil immigration enforcement, let alone for ICE officers. The idea that ICE officers could train for these sort of environments of going after non-criminal and these sweeps on the street, but also dealing with large protests and doing that in an operational environment were extremely strenuous on the officers themselves. You can imagine that these officers have not been trained to that. That has not been the typical operation and procedures of ICE or CBP over decades. So the idea that these officers, after being on these operations for days and hours in these intense situations, dealing with the weather and the sort of the blowback, there's no way that these officers could be trained to that. There's handbooks and procedures, there's best practices across federal law enforcement that should be followed. And there needs to be a constant review of these training procedures.
As ICE operations around the country have ramped up, we've seen ICE officers covering their faces. Why are they wearing masks? Is that unusual for law enforcement? It seems like even undercover agents in other departments show their face.
Yeah, I mean, it shows to me that these officers are being put in the environment and in the operations directed by their leadership and their command, where they know that the people in the communities and in the public, there's going to be blowback. There is risk to officers. Officers must be protected. But we have to ask ourselves, what is in the public safety interest? Is these sort of operations meeting the national security and public safety needs of our community and our country? Clearly, they're not. ICE and immigration enforcement, whether there's the agency of ICE, there will always be immigration management and enforcement. And we need to carry that out, focusing on national security and public safety threats. I mean, that's the thing, is just in my experience as the chief of staff of ICE during the Biden administration, these are the same officers that we were detailing to the border to humanely process when we were seeing border surges across the Southwest. They have a very challenging job, but putting them in these environments that are not truly meeting the sort of even the goals of this administration is a bit ridiculous.
So in the case of the death of Alex Pretti over the weekend, based on the videos that you've seen, can you tell us what seemed to go wrong?
Anytime you have a use of force, or for an ICE instance where someone may die in custody, there's always multi-pronged, unbiased, arbitrary sort of multi-agency reviews. That starts internally within ICE or CBP, within the Office of Professional Responsibility, the Inspector General, local and state authorities, other federal law enforcement agencies, even nonprofits in a lot of regards, in my experience, look at these sort of events. What I see on the ground is a very chaotic environment, and the questions need to be asked just not in the incident itself of this gentleman's death, but the hours before, operationally and tactically on the ground. They also need to look at what was the legal authorities, what were the officers, why were they what was this operation? Why were they carrying it out? What was the direction from their command? All those things need to be evaluated. And clearly on the ground, there's at least 9 to 10 officers not responding with lethal force, and one officer that predicates this sort of the shot, the use of the weapon did use force. What was the justification of that? So at all levels of these sort of operations need to be reviewed thoroughly and unbiasedly.
Do you think that there's a chance that ICE can regain public trust?
There's a need within our immigration system, especially when we have 14 million people in the immigration docket. There will always be a need for immigration enforcement and management. And that needs to be carried out in a humane, just way, focused on the individuals that have taken advantage of a broken immigration system that do want to do us harm. That is when Americans applaud the work of our immigration enforcement officers. We need to get back to that focused on keeping our community safe, but at the same time, we cannot sort of live in a world where we don't have accountability within the system, but we can do that in a humane, just way. But there's two things affecting this situation: politics. Why were these operations happening in Minnesota? But also the fact that sort of we have an immigration system that is broken, and there's accountability here on the backs of Congress and the leaderships that have been directing these operations.
Jason Hauser, so appreciate your insight. Really appreciate it.